Anishi. Thank you, Creator, for giving us this day. We thank you for our Mother Earth, the fire and the water. We thank you for all of our relatives and relations. And most importantly, we thank you for our lives. Thank you, thank you, thank you, and thank you is to the four directions. Um, so if I can, I'll offer up just one verse of a song. And this song here is it's a four direction song that we sing to the spirits of those four directions, and we call them in to be protectors and knowledge bearers that come and stay with us through ceremony and through times of need, and then they spend 8 days going back to the place from which they come. Lo no mane lo no mane do hande haya. We do aluna hape. Shawano e mane do. Shawano e mane do hande haya. We do aluna hape. One chinoe mane do. One chinoe mane do hande haya. We do aluna hape. Lo noe mane do. Wapa noe mane do. Shawa noe mane do. One to noe mane do. Hande haya. We do aluna hape. Anishi, thank you for that opportunity to.
Thank you, Chuck. Thank you, Chief. As we get started tonight, I wanted to just say that the format for tonight is that we have a series of questions that we've discussed in advance that we're going to go through. There is a chat on the side of the screen, and you're welcome to chat questions as we go. The only people who are voiced are the three presenters. And so that will be the format. We'll try and get to some questions if we can as we go, and do our best with that. This is a recorded session. There may be times in which all the people present could be seen. If you don't want your image to be seen in a recording, I don't think it'll be recorded under Ramapo's recording rules anyway, but you can also take your picture off. So let me get started. This is a conversation that I've been looking forward to for a long time. We have long conversations, and the other week I had this conversation with the chief that just really blew my socks off. It was just so amazing, and that's really the basis of thinking about this program. So, Chief, I wanted to start out with asking you about the history of the Ramapough-Lenape and of the Turtle Clan, and see if we can get the image to shift to the chief when you start talking. Go ahead, Chief.
Thank you. The Ramapough-Lenape people over the years have been classified as everything other than what we are. And who we are is the descendant of the Munsee speaking people. During the early days of first contact, we weren't called the Ramapo. The Wampanoag were not called the Wampanoag. Hackensacks were not called the Hackensack. The Tapans were not called the Tapans. The Esopus weren't called the Esopus. Delawares weren't called the Delawares. And why I say that is because before contact, those were all the place names of our villages, places of which small communities lived and were referenced by. Manhattan, Manhattan, right? That's the place where we went to go get our hickory for our bows. When it comes to the Ramapo is not our true name. It's not the name of the true place. Back in the 1600s, the word Ramapo was used as Ramapog, Ramapeg, Ramapoc, and Ramapo. But the funny thing is that in our language, the Muncie speaking language, we do not have R's. We're not an R dialect. We're an L dialect. And so that led me on a journey to really understand the meaning of place and the meaning of those words like Mawa, Mawawe, Wanakue, Wanaki, the Pomptons, right? And so, or the Pequannoks. And what you have to understand is that when European settlers began to become colonists, and when they came amongst our people, they asked them, what are you? Who are you? What's this place? And they would get words like, this is Tapan, right? This is Manahata. And they began to name our relatives, our families, our communities with the names of the places in which they were dwelling, thinking that that was their name. One example of that would be when the Delaware River, the Lenape Seafood, when that river was named after Lord Delaware. And the Native Americans, the Unamis, and some Muncie people who were living along the Delaware River became known as the Delaware Indians. That is a clear example of being named with a name of a place, right? And so the Ramapo in 1615 or 1624, somewhere around there, it was documented that this was what this place was called, and at the end of that documentation, verifiable information, what was said was that the name and the correct spelling of this place was Lamawo. So it's not Ramapo College, it's not Ramapo Mountains, it's not Ramapo Pass, it's not Ramapo River, it's not even really the Ramapo Indians. It's Lamawo. And Lamawo means slanting, downward slanting or slanting face. And it is a word that our people used for Ramapo Mountains, right? So when you're walking through the pass, you see the downward slanting face of the mountains. And that was our home and has always been, which is also verified for about 11,000 years ago. So coming to modern time, the Ramapo Muncie people, the Lunapawak Muncie people, through forced migration, some people have the thought that forced migration was that guns were put to backs, and sometimes that was the case. But forced migration also is the selling and buying and stealing of land. And through that time, the Ramapo people have maintained their presence in the Ramapo Mountains, almost at the level of human beings that exist today in the Ramapo Mountains, which is about 2,500 people who live along the mountain top. The Turtle Clan is in what is known now as Passaic County, and Ringwood, New Jersey is the core area. The Turtle Clan area does also go into Sussex County and into Orange County. Um, the and Michael, I don't know if you have a slide there of the territory of the Unami and Litgo and the Rama and the Muncie people, but
Yeah, I'm gonna put up. Let me check. Would you please mute your mic when you're not talking?
Who, me?
We're getting a lot, yeah, we're getting a lot of back sound.
Sorry.
So is this the slides you want?
Yes, this is. So what you'll see in this map is that the top half in the light green, that includes what we know today as New York City. It follows along the Raritan River. It goes into eastern Pennsylvania. And then it goes all the way up in New York State. And if you look to the right, you'll see that where that light green comes across is the bottom of Massachusetts. And then you'll also see that to western Connecticut, you'll also see that territory. The truth of the matter is that all of Connecticut, all of Maine, Vermont, Massachusetts, um, Rhode Island, all of these people are all relatives. We're all related. And Michael, if you can pull up the map that actually shows the Google Earth view. So this map here shows that the site of the 1644 massacre at Pound Ridge, that was actually a village called Ramapo by Chief Katona. At that village, there was over 700 of our men, our women, our children, our elders that were slaughtered there by Underhill. Almost a year to the day, when he was the one who also, along with Keefe, perpetrated the massacre in Pavonia, Jersey City, Liberty State Park, Caven Point to be exact. Also followed previous to that was the Pequot massacre in the swamp. So when it comes to the Ramapo people or the Ramapo, we're always being told, even to this day, even to an hour ago, that we're not who we are. The fact of the matter is that the Ramapo are the Muncie people. We are the ones who stayed. We are the ones who stayed here because we were asked to stay, right? By those who left. We were asked to stay here to protect our homelands, to protect our hunting, fishing, gathering, and stripping bark from trees. Those rights which we reserved for ourselves when we gave land away. If you look where the site of the massacre of the Ramapo in 1644 is at Pound Ridge, and then you look all the way to the left, you'll see where it says Mawa, Mawe, Mawawe. That's where the Ramapos begin to live today, and then the Ramapo Mountains start to the left. That's a 15-mile radius. Not very far. And yes, it would be 30 miles, but it's only 15 miles from where that massacre was, where the Ramapo were recorded as being in all of the land deeds that are recorded under Katona and the Ramapos. Even one that is listed in the New York State Archives, you could actually physically see the actual document, a picture of it. And what you'll see there is that the L is actually erased and replaced with an R, all the way back in the 1600s. And one of the pieces of documentation actually says that it was the Germans, it was probably Dutch, but they said it was the Germans who actually changed the L to an R because that's the word and how they use it and spoke. So we're not really the Ramapo. We're the Muncie people. And the place in which we dwelled was called Lamawo. And Lamawo means downward slanting face. That is who we are today. And so the Turtle Clan, again, is the Ringwood area. The Wolf Clan is in Mawawe, and over by Oakland and around that area. Saddle River was actually a very big part of where my lineage comes from before it became what it is today. Um, Also, step bottom of Stag Hill, where Chief Mannis's house was, where Stag Hill Creek went into the Ramapo River. And the deer clan, which is in Rockland County, Ramapo, New York, town of Ramapo, New York, Hillburn. Um, those are the three core areas of our people today. And the Turtle Clan, as proof of our existence in that very spot for all this time. When Peter Hasenclever was coming, the surveyor was coming across the mountains in 17, I can't remember the exact date, but in 1756, I believe, he wrote a letter in German and sent that letter back to somebody in Germany. That letter has not, to my knowledge, has not been fully transcribed to English, but the parts that have been, he states that while traversing the Ramapo Mountains, he came across this village of these Indians living in these dome-shaped hovels that were very well kept. And those people who were living in those so-called hovels, which were our wigwams, was the Turtle Clan. And when our people showed the 100-foot long shards of iron magnetite, I believe it is, that came out of the earth, they began to um, start to mine those areas. And there are records of the Ramapo people, being listed as Indians, that was there, and that didn't want to be involved with that actual part of mining, but instead made charcoal for the furnaces. And then over time, our people began to also work the mines, even to its deepest depth, which is 2,400 feet deep, 17 levels, hundreds of miles of tunnels. The Turtle Clan eventually moved from those wigwams into log cabins, and eventually, when the mining industry closed, our people of the Turtle Clan in the core area actually moved into those old mining houses, which were in total disrepair. In the early 1970s, a nonprofit was created called How To, and How To began to show us how to um, have a physical skill like carpentry or electrical or foundation work or roofing or plumbing. And that How To, that nonprofit actually not just gave our people a skill, but it also gave them the opportunity to build and own their very first home, right, in the 1970s. Through that time, um, that actual land, the core area of the Turtle Clan, was actually purchased by um, Ringwood Realty. And Ringwood Realty was a subsidiary company of the Ford Motor Corporation, who in 1956 had built the world's largest automobile manufacturing plant in Mahwah Way, New Jersey. Mahwah Way, by the way, means the gathering place, right? It's where all, and it's true today, right? Mahwah Way is the place where all of those highways come together. And before those were all those highways, those were all of our ancient trails, right? For over 10,000 years. And so where that Ford mortar plant was actually put, that was a part of the William Bond map, the Ramapo Tract of 1710. And when Steve Burton, our commission on the Indian Affairs for the state of New Jersey, when he went down to Hackensack to look at this map so we can get a copy of it, and put it in our library, what we discovered was that it was, when they pulled it out of the metal filing cabinet and unrolled it, it was actually on animal skin, unprotected, for 302 years that this was in the possession of Bergen County. So we began a fight to preserve that. It took about 2 years, and we were successful in getting it preserved so that nobody's hands would touch it anymore. And our fight to preserve it was that was part of our history, right? On there shows our long homes right there where the Ford mortar plant was built. which meant that back in 1956, when they were looking at land deeds and things like this, they would have also saw that. So when Ford bought the land in Ringwood, that land actually um, was very valuable to them, and they wanted to create a self-contained community that would have generated, $1 million a year in property taxes for the town of Ringwood. Through public outcry and persistence, the Turtle Clan fought. Over 1,000 people fought, to be able to stay in this very place that they have always known. When Ford lost that right to build their $50 million community, and Ringwood, the town, lost its right to gain $1 million a year, Ford commenced the dumping of toxic waste. That was 56 years ago. There's no longer over 1,000 people. Life there has changed. For the indigenous people of northern New Jersey and southern New York, our lives there have changed forever, and probably even more so than from first contact, when our name was given to us to be Ramapo, which was actually Lamawo, which wasn't our name anyway. It was just the place in which we lived. Like the Esopus weren't the Esopus. They were just Munsee people who lived at a place named Sipwis. And Sipwis is where the wild plums grew. So that is the lead-in to this conversation with Chief Mann and our truths tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief. And I wanted to just turn to Chuck for a moment. Chuck, you grew up in Hilburn, living among the Ramapo people. Do you have any comments briefly to add? You can unmute yourself now. Yes, we're fine.
Okay. With everything that when I was little, there were three bodies of people. There were people who were racist, and then the nominal people, who included white people.
Chuck, you are breaking up, Chuck. Chuck, you're breaking up. So
Okay.
take your picture off for a moment and see if we can hear you.
Oh, you told me to take my.
Stop your video. Stop your video. Try now.
I'm trying to stop the video. Oh, there we go. Everything is delayed here, it seems.
Okay, well, just go with the flow. But you were saying that there were three groups of people.
Three, yeah. And had factions, racism, but it was also cohesion, because there was also a recognition of the longevity of the family. And by the time I was 7 years in Native people, and
So, Chuck, just stop for a minute. Unfortunately, Chuck, you're breaking up a lot. What I think I'm going to have you do is leave the meeting and come back in. And hopefully when you come back in, we'll pick this conversation up. I'll go ahead with the chief when you get back in. Hopefully your things will work better, but let's try that, okay? So let's go back to you, Chief, and let me ask you to just tell us for a moment how you got the calling to become chief of the Turtle Clan.
About 12 years ago, I was living in Rhode Island, in Westerly, Rhode Island, by the beach. I was married. I had a business, friends, boats, pretty much lived by the shore, and it was great to be able to live there as, a Native American, not too far away from the Pequots or the Mohegans, not too far away from the Narragansetts and whatnot. And my brother Michael, um, well, prior to that, I was working in Boston, outside of Boston. And every day I would drive up there, um, and this blue heron would pass me across the highway every single morning. And it didn't matter if I was, an hour earlier or an hour later. It was at that time, I didn't understand how it was not a coincidence, but it seemed very bizarre to me. And so for a really long time, it was like 3 months, I was working up there. And when I had finished, working on that job, I came back, to Rhode Island and began working for myself again. And my brother Michael had called me and asked me if I wanted to come down to our ceremonial lands in Mahwah, New Jersey, and begin to work on building our big home, our big house, which is where we gather and pray and hold ceremony. Um, that land, by the way, has been under attack by outside forces for the last few years, but we're slowly getting through that. Which is also across from Ramapo College. And so I came down, and I didn't see that blue heron for any time after that, and then I came down to meet my brother on the land, and I got out, and he got out of his truck, and he gave me this big hug, and all of a sudden I heard this unbelievable, crazy noise. Like if we actually knew what a pterodactyl sounded like, that's what it sounded like. And lo and behold, when I looked up, that blue heron flew right down through where, that was marked out for our big house. And it landed in the Ramapo River on a branch. And I can go there at any time, and that blue heron's still there. And so after coming down time after time after time to the land and working on the big house, um, eventually Chief Perry and other council members were there. And eventually I was asked what did I think about, becoming or, running for the Turtle Clan chief. And so I went back to Rhode Island and thought about that and made the decision that I think there's something that I needed to do. And, and I did. I became this person. Um, I've ran in a few elections and have won, and um, it's a big responsibility, to have to care for 1,500 people in your family. Try to help them with any needs they have, anything from burials to heat or lights or spiritual things. Having a ceremony for them, um, being an ear, just listening. And I also, through that time, picked up the fight for Man versus Ford, um, which is still an ongoing battle. Um, and before I came home, I had this vision, and the vision was of me, running through a forest and through the swamp, and my hair kept getting caught, on the branches and on the briar briars, and it dawned on me before I came home that what I needed to do was to cut all my hair off. Being descended from Chief Mann, um, that gave me what I believe is a inherent responsibility to not just my family, not just the Ramapo, but all Muncie people that exist today, all of our ancestors, and all of those yet to come. But I completely gave up my entire life, everything, you name it, whatever I had was gone. And I did that because I understood what humility was. And I'm the richest person in the world. You know, I may not have, a fancy car. I may not have, the nicest of things or the nicest of house, or clothes, or shoes, you know. Um, but I am the richest man in the world. That's my that's my belief. It's not something that I can separate myself from because being the having the ability, having that ability to be asked to be the head of your family, head of your clan, head of your community is a huge responsibility. Very time consuming. You have to be willing to sacrifice a lot. You know, I don't get to do too many family gatherings. I don't get to do, picnics and things like that or go on vacation. 7 days a week. That's who I am. You know.
So as we go forward, we'll get a chance to see what you've been doing those 7 days a week. But before we go forward, I wanted to just touch on something else about the Ramapoughs, which is that um, most of us look at the Ramapo Mountains when we go to the college, and we see it through our eyes. But when we move through this region, through your eyes, we see in many places a sacred geography, a sacred landscape. It's a landscape that looks very different than the landscape we see. Can you just kind of talk about that sacred landscape, please?
Sure. Um, we look at many things and give that a contextual, put it in a contextual place where what we deem as being sacred to us, which is the only people that really matters to, um, should be, taken into account. It should be what guides laws. It should be what guides policy. And the Ramapo Mountains, when you sit back and you look at it and you're on Route 17 or you're on 287 or you're on 87 and you look up at that mountain and you're just like, wow, that's beautiful. First of all, the Ramapo Mountains used to actually rival the Himalayan mountains. And most people have no concept of that, right? But they did. The Ramapo Mountains is a very spiritual, very sacred place today, and it has been forever. If you remember those giant shards of iron ore that coming out of the ground that I spoke about, imagine 10,000 years ago when our ancestors were here, and all the electrical activity that we know about through today, right, in this colonized world which we live in. We in science we know what all that's about, right, but it still has a spiritual connection to it. And so just imagine how powerful of a place, how revered of a place that the Ramapo Mountains was and still is. And just because you see it with these beautiful trees and forests and hiking places and ledges and cliffs to go hiking on, I mean, people come all over the world, they come here to look out, you know. And what they don't notice when they're walking through there is that, there's a stone here that doesn't belong there. And there's, a big stone and a little stone over here that doesn't really, I mean, it stands out, but they don't quite understand what that is. And those are all, like effigies. Our ancestors would take and move boulders the size of trucks, bigger than that. There is throughout the Ramapo Mountains what we call cradle rock, and that is a stone. That's a rock that can be the size of a Volkswagen or bigger. That's actually lifted up in the air, and it sits on 4 or 5 little stones underneath it, and it's elevated. Years ago, I went to at the Lautenberg Center in Sterling Forest. I went there to hear a talk from Ed Lennox, who has through archaeology has proven the Ramapo's existence in the Ramapo Mountains for the last 10,000 years or more. And while I was there was a gentleman who presented these Cradle rocks. And when I saw it come up on the screen, I'm like, oh no, what does he have that up there for? And how did he get it? Right? That should be protected. And as he was going on, he was saying how throughout the northern New Jersey and southern New York, there are these cradle rocks all over the place. And he had a friend that asked if he had ever put it to the constellations. And he said no. And so they did. They started putting it to the constellations. And eventually they came to a constellation, and that constellation is Drago. You can't see Drago today from here because of all the ambient lighting, but Drago can still be seen out west with the Hopi, right? And that goes to tell you, I mean, we're an ancient people, right? We haven't lived in the Ramapo Mountains for 300 years, next to all the people whose ancestors came here, you know. There is ceremonial landscape, stone landscapes throughout, cairns that you see, like over in Hackett's uh, Mount Olive. You're driving down 46 and you're going down the hill and you look over to your right where the water property is all fenced off. Well, inside there is a little stream, and you'll notice that there's these big round piles of stones. Those are sacred to us, right? And even the state archaeologists, and state museum and the state SHPO's office want to not put the validity in them from our word of mouth, which it should be, right? Because we are the ones who hold our own truth. No one else holds the Ramapo's truth. Or if it was some other tribe, right? These are our truths, right? Like the Black Hills. I can't tell you that the Black Hills are sacred to those people, but those people who are there, those mountains are so sacred that they refuse to take the money from the federal government, which is even up over $1 billion right now because money and paper means nothing. Protecting our sacred places does. We have a ceremonial viewing place where there is a viewing seat. That seat is in the east. On the ground in a big circle is 7 stones to the right. Those 7 stones relates to Pleiades. On the left hand side is the Big Dipper, big huge stone, right, representing that hammer. But for us, it's not a hammer. That's the bear, right, and that bear touches the earth in the early part of the year. And so, even with all this modern technology and modern geniuses and educations, I always sit there and listen to, these other folks who are geniuses. They really are. And they're my friends, but I sit there and I listen to them talk about how our ancestors viewed things. And I'm sitting there going, well, that's impossible because that's a viewing seat. So, when you think about these things, our ancestors would sit with their sun to the back, and as the sun came up over the top of them, it would cast a shadow on the stones in front of them, which they would then be able to read the stars and read the time of year it was and all of those things. Rock shelters. Right now, I'm a part of a fight to protect the remaining rock shelters and caves, Lookout Mountain, Dutchess Quarry site. And that quarry is probably deeper than it should have been allowed to go. It's only 100 yards or so from the other edge. On the southern face, it's all gone. All of our ancestors' history, all of those sacred places, those rock shelters that kept my ancestors warm and protected from everything, are gone. We can't go there, recognize that, pray there. The spirit of them, is still there. Needs to be recognized. We need to be allowed to go there, to be allowed to pray. And the only ones who can say anything truthfully about that is us Muncie people. It's our truth, and our truth needs to be recognized and honored.
Let me just interject. We took you to the Dutchess Quarry site 2 weeks ago because we're battling to try to prevent more mining that might endanger the site. And you went inside the caves. Just share what you said when you were actually in those caves with people dating back, having occupied those caves at least 12,500 years and maybe as long as 15,000 years ago, correlating to when people crossed over the Bering Strait. What went through your head? What was in your heart?
I can't even begin to tell you what really went through my mind, and that came out of my heart. Um, to be sitting in a place, looking out, hearing the echoes of the voices from so long ago. Hearing the kids' laughter. You know, smelling the food cooking and the smoke rising from the fire. Um, it was unbelievable to me. You know, it was unbelievable to me that I could actually touch something that my ancestors relied upon so that they could persevere, right? Through all those hard times, through the mastodons and the giant beavers and all of those things. The woodlands buffalo that no one even thinks about. We don't even hear about the woodlands buffalo that were much bigger than the buffaloes out west, right? When kids are learning, or colleges, if they have Native American studies, you're usually talking about, after 1756, you know, wild horses were here. Our ancestors built a giant wooden structure in New Jersey. It was giant. And they would run those horses down. And there's a town, or used to be a town called Horse Pound, right? And they would run those horses down and funnel them into that big, huge wooden structure, right? The Lakota Sioux, they're not Western Plains Indians. They're from the East Coast. But the message that they received early on had them begin to move, right? The Muncie people, the Lenape, the people who the Ramapos are today and descend from, whose ancestors were here, it took a lot to stay here, you know? So being in that place where my ancestors were, you know, they're still there. And, I offered up a song in there and spoke in my language because our ancestors that were there do not understand this tongue. That's why it's important, once a day at minimum. That would be the minimum that I would ever get past me, to not use one of our words from our language. And the reason why is because I want our ancestors always to know that I always am thinking of them and that I'm always acknowledging them. And the one word that I make sure that I use every day is anishik, right? That means thank you in Muncie. And I use that because they will know that I am always grateful and thankful, for everything in my life. But I'm thankful for them, for their perseverance, right? For their ability to stay here from the beginning of time. Our creation story does not have us Muncie people coming over the Bering Strait. That's not our truth, right? Our ancestors, and what the story we're told, is that the wolf people came from out from underneath the rock, the Osinal, from out from underneath the earth, and that we came out from there and we saw the deer, and we took down a deer and brought that deer back to our community. And because we were so thankful and grateful for that deer that provided us everything from food to clothing to tools, we came out from under the earth. And when we came out from under the earth, the Creator had given the wolf, that ability to name everything. The Muncie people, the Muncie speaking people, and the Muncie language is what that actually is. Lenape. That is the oldest language going back to archaic time. And if Munsee language is the oldest language going back to archaic time, that means that those archaic people are who we descend from. The importance of those caves and those rock shelters there, and even to the Jindal site in southern New Jersey, that's next to the Lenape Seapu, the Delaware River. All of those artifacts that were pulled out of there by amateur archaeologists, and then person dies, and somehow the University of Illinois buys it all for $1 million. Why are our ancestral items being shipped out of this state, for one? For two, they should have never been pulled out of the ground. Those things are all sacred to us. So that is an amazing place. Our ancestors are still, the spirit of our ancestors are there. I am inherently responsible to make sure that they're able to continue to rest there in that space, right? And nobody can say that that's not my truth. And I will say this, and I said this last night when I was giving a presentation at Montclair State University. I have no problem with religion, and I think that because religion is based in spirituality, right? But where religion goes wrong is not the religion itself, but it's the people who became the ones who are dominating that, right? And the Bible that was written by a man and rewritten by men, and the New Testament and all these other things, right? But it was still written by a human being. And everybody who follows that, Catholic religion, um, believes that. And I wouldn't be any person to stand up to say, well, that's not right, you know. So, reason why I bring that up is because just like that is important, and so many millions, if not billions, of human beings believe in that, right? Then there is nothing wrong with what we believe. And the only ones who have the power to say that this is this or this is that and speak their truth is us, right? Those sites up there and all those ceremonial stone landscapes throughout the lands are beyond sacred to us. As a matter of fact, as it was talked about in the 1700s, but it was written down in the 1600s. A I forget his name, but he witnessed one of our ancestors walking down the path and took a stone and took that stone and piled it on top of the other stones that were there. And he wrote down that this must be an ancient ceremonial custom of the Indian. So it's documented for those who don't believe with the words that come out of my mouth or our mouths, right? But it shouldn't take that for someone else to believe what is our truth. We existed here, right, in this space for 10 to 15,000 years. And America is only how many years old? Right.
So let me just add a question that extends from what you're saying, which is um, as sites become threatened, as we have with Dutchess Quarry, but it's happened many other times, do you find that state and federal officials respect your view of what is sacred uh, geology, sacred landscape, or do they operate by a different standard?
They operate by a different standard. Um, in regards to federally funded projects, the federal government actually does take the time to make sure that whoever those people are that are running those projects reach out to every federally recognized tribe or state recognized tribe. So when the Texas uh, whatever their name was, Tennessee gas pipeline came through the Ramapo Mountains, the Ramapough-Lenape Nation stood up and fought that. I myself, particularly, and Ramapo Conservancy, Judy Sullivan, were like little terrier dogs on their pant leg. We wouldn't let go. And this little tribe that everybody wants to say is not who they are was very successful in actually stopping the progression of this to move to permit for 3 months, right? And in the end, we lost that battle, but we actually set a precedent, right, as a state recognized tribe, right? Because being state recognized doesn't mean that we have any less authority than anybody, right? That's actually acknowledging that we are who we are. And when anybody strips away any kind of federal or state designation, when it comes down to it, we are who we are. We're who we say we are. German people, Jewish people, Amish people, people from Afghanistan, Iraq, Europe, Italy, Spain, all those places, they don't have to live in two worlds, right? We do. We
Let,
actually,
let me follow up on that point, which is that in my own work with Indigenous people, I talk about what I call simultaneity, or this idea of living in two worlds. And by the way, Chief Mann, we've lost your image. Try and see if you can restart your video, because we'd rather look at you if we can, but right now we can't. But I was saying about simultaneity, about living in two worlds. You started to go in this direction, but say a word about this. And I think it's an important thing for people to understand, this idea of being in two different worlds at the same time.
can you see me now?
Unfortunately, not.
Really?
Your bandwidth may be sagging out at the moment.
Oh no, we just spent a couple $100 on extra items in the house.
Well,
Uh,
let's answer this question and see whether I'll get Chuck talking in a minute now that he's back, and we'll see.
sure.
Maybe we'll have you leave and come back and see if that solves it. Although
So can
I'm
you can
reluctant
you
to have
ask
to
that
leave.
again?
Yeah, sure. Expand on this idea of living in two worlds.
So living in two worlds. So you have an indigenous community. This indigenous community has lived in a place for an eternity, right? Since time immemorial. Colonizers come to that place and they take it over, they make it their country. So, what everybody else fails to see is that Native people don't understand the term conquered, right? Native people still live here, they still live in their traditional ways. What I mean by living in two worlds is that we maintain our cultural life. We do ceremonies. We go to sacred sites. We go to sacred places. We go paddling, which is not just to go have fun on a river. We go there to honor our ancestors in those original pathways that we traveled, right? We go to our burial grounds that are out in the middle of the woods that people don't even recognize them, right? And then what we have to do is that we have to go into the colonial world that has been created for us. And when we go out into that colonial world, we don't necessarily fit to what the outside world views as Native American, but or as Americans in general. We don't need to have a court. We don't need to have a political elected system in order for us to thrive and live. We believe in living in nature, right? When those people decided that they were going to write this kind of book, and I think it happened around a time of eugenics and stuff like that, where they were like, well, we as a dominant culture need to control nature, right? We need to let nature know that you're there as a tool for us, right? You don't control us, we control you. For native indigenous people around the world, right, who still recognize their own cultures, we believe that we're actually just one tiny little piece of earth in the middle of all that nature. We have to live in balance with it. A perfect example is Wayne, New Jersey. They're not living in balance there. They have a amazing amount of deer overrun, right? There's so many deer there, it's not even funny. Who would have thought that there's 1,500 acres of preserved land in Wayne, New Jersey, right? It actually butts up to William Patterson College. It's co-managed by the Nature Conservancy, the state of New Jersey, and Wayne. Why is it not something this simple, right? The Turtle Clan people who live in Ringwood, New Jersey, in a federal Superfund site, they didn't dump it on themselves. People who should be held accountable for the town of Ringwood and the state of New Jersey. Why aren't those people all getting together to say, "Hey, there's 1,500 acres of land here. Why don't you guys be able to go down there and hunt clean animals, right? So that you guys can continue living in a sustenance way, right? Because that is how we live. Right now, Chief Mann is actually working with nonprofit groups, right? So, New Jersey DSA, Four Directions Mutual Aid, we Tulsa Aid, and there's another one that's similar to Tulsa Aid, where they are helping us to actually get a couple hundred families worth of food, and we get it all together, and then we go into the community and we distribute food to them specifically in this time of pandemic, so that these people who are compromised with their health because of the dumping that's occurred and nobody has taken any action to help them outside of us, right? So that we can prevent them from going to the grocery store, which is living in two worlds. If the land that the Turtle Clan lives on in the core area was not polluted, we would spend less time in the colonial world and more time in our natural world where we belong. That is living in two worlds.
Thank you, Chief. So my computer is telling me that you either have low bandwidth or you may have used up you may be low in RAM right now on your computer. So try shutting down other things on your computer that you can shed and see whether that brings your picture back. And we'll take other steps after that. But while we've got Chuck here, I'm going to give him voice and ask him a question. And if I can find him on my... I'm trying, Chuck. Yeah, I know. Okay. I've sent you controls so you can unmute yourself. There you go.
Now, can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, okay. I'm not going to but if you can hear me, that.
Well, you are breaking up a little bit, but let's see how we do. Let's come back to that question I asked you before. But you grew up among the Ramapos, and what are your thoughts about this and your ability to see these two worlds actually through your own eyes?
Well, it plays right into the idea of the two worlds, in that I literally was going to school, a private school, and learning the way for one world, primarily the white world, but we'll call it the dominant player, you might say. And I was, hunting and fishing, trapping as a boy with kids in Hillburn who other world, and I was people realize that there go, and that one world doesn't always the other. That was very true, and what I'd like to just say, this talk said that from the white perspective, the part of me that's white, part of me that's grew up in the white world, you could say, we have a task, I think, and it is that, and that's a tough task because it's hard to deconstruct the thing that you are when you necessarily believe there's any reason to construct. You don't feel bad yourself. I have to say, don't for, and that's for me very irresponsible because they are entitled, and that entitlement is part of that impacted upon this place, 500 years ago, and continues to. I really do feel that it's not hard to figure this out. We have a task. We have brothers and sisters, all do not look like us, but they're, cut them, they bleed the same color we bleed. We are connected here. And of dominance, but it's not impossible. First, recognize the fact this is that world, and there's the way it speaks to you, and you're gifted, hear it in a different way, which was part of my upbringing, which was very important. I grew up that way. When I was in 7th grade, Michael, the nuns decided that I was a pagan because I was and when my parents were told this, okay, but that's a here, especially well, that here and get this thing up that there are to be. That's
So, Chuck, you broke up there a bit at the end, but I think we got the gist of what you were saying, and
okay.
you have a fascinating perspective on this. So I wanted to turn to another topic, but it's a topic, Chuck, that you did your dissertation on. But I want to turn to the chief to get us started talking about it. And Chief, I gather we don't have your video back, but try it again. Keep trying it. But I don't want you to leave the program at the moment because I need you to.
Can you see me or no?
We cannot see you, but we can hear you. But I'm going to share my screen anyway. So what I'm going to do at the moment is leave this, and I'm going to shoot over to this view. This is a view of Upper Ringwood, where the Turtle Clan is based. And what I'd like you to do, Chief, is, and Chuck, you can chime in, is just tell us what happened in Upper Ringwood, what happened to the Turtle Clan related to the Ford dumping of hazardous waste from the Mahwah car assembly plant.
Are you asking me or Chuck?
I'm asking you, but I said Chuck could chime in.
Oh, okay. So, let me just see where, okay. So in the bottom of the screen to the left of center is actually the community. And there's only 2 ways in and out. There is currently 48 homes. 46 of those are owned by Ramapo. Every one of them is in the federal Superfund site. It's a site that in 1994 was delisted. And we don't believe in coincidences because in 1994, that's also when the federal government denied our application for federal recognition and claimed that we were just Afro-Dutch. and then revert that. They changed that decision back in 2000 when we sued them, and perjured themselves in court. So in this area, there is mine shafts, there is open pits, there is illegal municipal dumps that were put in there, and there is this one particular area directly across from. No, go back the other way. Yes. So right across from what would be the recycling center, right there now on the left. This area to the right is the O'Connor disposal area of Peters Mine Road. This particular area, when it was being excavated to have paint sludge removed, the EPA would then dig the material up and send it to Michigan. When it got to Michigan, it was actually put through the furnace twice at incredible temperatures, to burn off and to separate out the different types of metals and contaminants that was in it. And they called the EPA up and they told the EPA that you need to get all your people out of there now, this minute. The EPA made the phone call, all those people all left, and the Turtle Clan went about its business living its life and didn't find out for probably a month or more that the reason why all those people left and why they stopped working was because the material, after running through the furnace 2 times, was too toxic to be buried anywhere in the continental United States or its territories. After much deliberation and laxed environmental laws in Canada, I believe it was Clean Harbors, took that material and brought it to Canada, dumped it on open ground landfill across from the Chippewa Reservation, which Jan Barry, incredible friend and reporter, environmental investigative reporter, had learned that those Chippewa up there were exhibiting the same health ailments as the Turtle Clan, and I can't even begin to tell you the heart wrenching feeling that Wayne Mann, myself, and the Turtle Clan have, to this day, that material that was in our community, that even though it was killing us and still is, was actually brought to another native community somewhere in the world, and now they're getting sick and dying too, all from the incredible actions of a corporation, um, Ford, and the municipality of the town of Ringwood, who sent Henry Ford, the grandson in Michigan, letters requesting that all the industrial waste from the Mahwah plant be brought and disposed of in this Native American community. All of it. There's documents that showed that Ford was disposing of 16 million pounds of paint sludge alone every quarter. And if you go by what they say, which is a lie, that they only dumped for 4 years, even if you go by that, and 4 times 4 is 16, and then you take 16 and multiply 16 times 16 million pounds of paint sludge alone. That's not including all the other waste that they disposed of. That's enough waste to kill everybody in the entire United States. I'll even take it one step further to tell you that if you were to actually scroll down, and it's probably not on here, but less than a mile away is the Wanacue Reservoir. Right there. Boom. Right? The EPA wants to admit that they find 1,4-dioxane, which is known cancer-causing chemical. They have said that they found it at the mouth of Park Brook. Park Brook empties into Ringwood River. The Ringwood River, right, is Sally's Pond, flows all the way down to the Wanacue Reservoir. I drilled them on the fact that if you're finding this chemical at the mouth of Park Brook, does that mean that it's in Sally's Pond? And then they would say to me, well, Chief Mann, we found it at the mouth of Park Brook. Now, I can't tell you how many times I've said this to them in a row, or how many times I've said it to them overall. The fact of the matter is that the reality is here. The reality is that for 56 years, This toxic waste has been leaching into the Wanacue Reservoir, not maybe, because back in the 70s, it was the Wanacue Reservoir people who were actually doing testing and writing and sampling and saying that this stuff was leaching into the Wanacue Reservoir, right? And to make it worse, when the Wanacue Reservoir, like right now, is really low, they take water from Pompton Lakes, which is polluted by DuPont for 100 years, and pump that toxic water back up to the Wanacue Reservoir. They don't test for any of those chemicals, and they don't test for any of the 700 chemicals besides lead in the Wanacue Reservoir when it leaves there. And guess where it goes? Why don't we pull up Newark or Passaic or Jersey City or Franklin Lakes? And you look at that. There's 4 to 6 million people for 56 years have been drinking toxic water, worse than water that's in Flint, Michigan. It is a total disgrace. I mean, that's not even a word. How do those people, millions of people, 4 to 6 million people in the state of New Jersey, should be considered stakeholders because they rely on that water source? And if they can't drink that water, where is the state of New Jersey or the federal government going to find water for 4 to 6 million people? All they want to say down in Newark. Now, New Jersey is known for having one of the highest levels of autism in children. I'll guarantee you that if you looked at where those areas of high autism is going to be in every area that you'll find probably gets their water from the Wanacue Reservoir water system. How come those people who live in Passaic and Patterson and Newark and Jersey City and even the powerful rich people that live in Franklin Lakes, how come not one of them has ever had the opportunity or the chance to voice their comments or opinion on the record of decision to leave everything there and cap it, and to include leave the Indians there and allow them to continue to die without moving them? None of that is acceptable. It's not acceptable now. It's not acceptable 56 years ago. The Hewitt family knew that it wasn't acceptable when they wrote it in the land deed. That everybody, the EPA says, well, the land deed's not. Nobody acts on it, so that it's not valid. But the truth of the matter is, when I brought it to their attention that any landfill or anything that was dumped on that land by law has to be removed. It's a valid land deed. It runs with the land, and it's still there, and everybody wants to ignore it, but Chief Mann. What Ford Motor Company did, what the town of Ringwood allowed to do, and also created the Ringwood Solid Waste Authority, right? What the state of New Jersey did by issuing a permit to dump the industrial waste there for a year. All of those people are responsible for what's taken place in the state of New Jersey, not just to us, but to 4 to 6 million people. People need to be held accountable, right? And because this is the Indians living in the mountains in which they resided in for the last 10, 12,000 years, and everybody has different names to call them to take away the fact that they're Native Americans, it doesn't matter. The truth of the matter is it does matter. We're the ones fighting to protect, even though we're dying every day. We're the ones, the native people of New Jersey, right? The original inhabitants. We're the ones fighting. That's our inherent responsibility. Even though we're dying and we're sick and we have to go to funerals every day, right? We're the ones who are fighting, along with good people like Michael Edelstein and Dr. Chuck Stead and President Mercer and Jack Chen and others, to help prevent one of the largest disasters in America. It's been happening for 56 years. When chemicals entered the water system because they flipped the switch in Michigan, and the chemicals in that water began to leach the lead out of the pipes. In Newark, for 56 years, there's been these chemicals in this water, and kids having autism, kids having mental disabilities because your largest organism on your largest organ on your body is your skin. When those little babies are inside their mothers, they're taking in everything their mother takes in. When those babies are born, they're given either breast milk, which is water from their mother, or they're given water from the tap to create their food. They're not sitting there eating on windowsills. That's ridiculous. What they are doing is that they're taking in something and have been since before they were even born, right? That little egg that's in all women is always there. This is one of the largest cover-ups ever in the world, besides the fact that they cover up that the Ramapo aren't the Ramapo, right? This is something that needs to be addressed on such a large scale, and it needs to be addressed. This is not reparations, right? This is a matter of saving people's lives into the future. Or New Jersey won't be the most populous state in the union, right?
So I just wanted to, first of all, note that the Ramapo River itself, part of it is pumped up into the Wanacue Reservoir. So we are directly connected to everything the chief is saying. But Chuck, do you have anything that you wanted to just throw in for a couple of minutes?
Yeah, I mean, I'm agreeing with, of course, with everything that Chief is saying. And I would just like to add, it's important to remember that the cleanup that we were capable of doing on the New York side of the border that I wrote about in my book um, happened because the municipality on the New York side hadn't participated in the dumping. On the New Jersey side, the borough of Ringwood, their governing body, did participate in the dumping in that there was an exchange and an agreement and there was some money involved. So their hands are dirty. That's the only reason why Ringwood slows down to a halt when every time we start to get somewhere, we don't get somewhere because we wind up with Ford understanding that Ringwood is also complicit. In the town of Ramapo, New York, they were not complicit. So they had, thank God, they had the willingness at that time, with a different supervisor at that time, to move ahead with pressing the DEC to press Ford into doing the cleanup for the materials there. And we did a fairly substantial cleanup. In Ringwood, it will always fall back to the fact that the borough hall, which is interestingly enough right down the road there on Margaret King Highway from Turtle Clan country. In fact, you can even see it right now on the there you can see it. Sure enough, the folks at the borough hall, they know that they were complicit. They were involved, not necessarily the ones who are there now, but that is their lineage, that is their history, and they don't want to face that. They wouldn't be bankrupt by it, but they certainly would be taxed for it. Again, that's part of the decolonizing thing I talked about before. It's okay for them to walk away from this, is their attitude. And they're not walking away, they're getting something out of this. They're getting that swift, brand new little high-tech recycling center that has been proposed to be top of the O'Connor Field, and the EPA is happy to support a project like that because Ford seems to want it. Of course, Ford wants it. It means they don't have to clean the paint up. It's less expensive. It's less expensive for Ford to build this nice little, state-of-the-art recycling center, which is a revenue flow for the borough of Ringwood. It's less expensive to give them that gift than it is for them to do the kind of remediation they did over in the Torn Valley.
That's the absolute truth. And I just want to say something else to that, Chuck. Ford gave the town of Ringwood $4.1 million to build a $1 million recycling center.
Yep.
By doing that, the town saved Ford $36 million.
Yep. Or more. Or more.
Well, probably way more.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And the other thing that's here too is that the state of New Jersey to go after reparations, right? Or not reparations, but for the state of New Jersey to go after natural resource damages. I sat there and told Michael Gordon, right? How are you and tell them that they need to pay $1 billion in natural resource damages, right? Because it's never going to be cleaned up. And the Indians living here are a natural resource to the state of New Jersey as well. Well, that's why we have to negotiate. Well, yeah, you have to negotiate because you guys are just as complicit. You guys signed that permit to dump that stuff there, and you haven't done anything yet since then. You haven't done anything in 30, 40 years to protect the people who are living there. Why are they still living in a federal Superfund site? Why are they still paying taxes on houses that have no value? Why
Yep.
are they still being allowed to die? Why do they want to charge me $2,000 for 100 acres of land so I can grow food to give to my community to survive? They all have a responsibility to these people and to the people in Newark and everybody else who drinks that water, right? It's an
Yep.
inherent responsibility of theirs. And to say that somebody is not the people who were there when this stuff occurred, if you know about it, inaction is just as guilty as action,
Exactly.
right? Passive
Yep.
aggressive violence is still violence.
Yep. Yep.
So let me just chime in and summarize a few points because I want people not familiar with the situation to follow everything that you're saying. But what we have is the Ford built what at that time was the largest assembly plant in the world in Mahwah. It was on the site of what we now know as the Sheraton Hotel, very close to the college. When I started teaching at Ramapo in 1974, many of my students were shift workers at the plant, but that plant produced contamination. It produced toxic waste. And among that waste, the principal part of it was paint sludge. And Ford got rid of that paint sludge by having haulers dump it illegally. Maybe it wasn't illegal at that point, it's a gray area, but dumping it illegally all through the Ramapo Mountains on the New York side and on the New Jersey side. And when Chuck talked about the cleanup on the New York side, he worked with many Ramapo students to actually discover areas that were still contaminated and brought this to New York's view, and New York acted on it and has cleaned up or made Ford clean up that waste. But when we look at the New Jersey side, the story has been very different. The state has not forced action, and the federal government is actually in the driver's seat. Superfund was created in 1980. Within 2 years, this site in Ringwood was named to the Superfund list that determines where cleanups occur. And that's shows you that this was one of the sites recognized as one of the most contaminated sites in the nation. And what happened in Ringwood is very interesting. And if you, again, I'll zoom in on the map, but you see that there are Cannon Mine Road and Peters Mine Road. There are two major iron mines here that date all the way back to the Industrial Revolution, the first Industrial Revolution in the United States. And where Ramapos were primary workers in the mines. And in this area here on Peters Mine Road, we have area where many of these homes up on the hill here are actually original workers' homes from that period, and Ramapos live in them. And so this was the first Industrial Revolution. That's from an environmental justice standpoint, the first issue to be raised here. All this area is undermined. The Peters Mine is one of the largest mines imaginable. The chief can tell us exactly how big it is. And Cannon Mine is also a large mine, but they extend all the way under this whole area. And what happens is that, so people are living on top of mined out areas, and those mines sometimes subside. So you have sinkholes develop. A child from the nation was lost in one of those. So that's one issue going on. But then Ford comes along and it fills up these mines with toxic waste. It also scatters paint sludge all over the landscape on the surface, so that Ramapos come in active contact with it in the course of their everyday lives as children playing with it because it was bright and glittery. It's everywhere in their environment. So this is the situation that first Superfund effort confronted. But ironically, when the site was delisted a number of years later because it was allegedly cleaned up, people started finding more paint sludge, and it didn't seem to be cleaned up at all. So as the chief mentioned, our colleague in our program, Jan Berry or Jan Crump, who was a reporter for the Bergen Record, undertook a journalism which is among the finest you'll ever find, investigative journalism, in which he uncovered again and again and again the fact that the contamination had not been cleaned up. And because it had not been cleaned up, Superfund or EPA designated Upper Ringwood to the list that the national priority list for Superfund. And once again, it was listed for Superfund. And so you have a second round of Superfund occurring, which is focused in the first phase on these mines and the surface contamination, and on the second phase, at least in part of the community, and the second phase has been on groundwater contamination. It's still going on, but in that first phase, what the Cannon Mine site was the other site, the O'Connor landfill site was the other site besides the Cannon Mine and Peters Mine sites. And that site was supposed to be reclaimed back to a pristine forest, not a forest full of contamination. And that forest would have allowed the people living here to begin to have some subsistence life right in their community after it was cleaned up. But at the last minute, and I mean the last minute, Ford and Ringwood, which are both responsible parties in this Superfund action, decided, Ringwood taking the lead, that it would move its recycling center from down here up into this area. And by doing that, they wouldn't have to clean up the O'Connor landfill. In fact, it could have a superficial cleanup. Most of the waste would be left there, no reclamation at all. So the double cross that's being discussed is really the shift at the absolute last second of what was recommended as the remedial cleanup. And so by the time the record of decision was issued, this site was never going to be cleaned up. So that's just a quick synopsis in case people are not familiar with the site. I don't know whether Chief or Chuck want to add anything to it.
I just want to add one thing, and that's often when we talk about these things, people will say, because I heard it said earlier by you, we don't know that at that time was it considered illegal, meaning, back in the 60s, say. And Chief is right. They weren't dumping for 4 years. They were here for 25 years. I have records that clearly established they dumped for 25 years. So that nonsense of squishing it down to the 4 years is just what it is. It's nonsense. But the thing I want to say here, this is important to remember. The dumping that they did in Torn Valley, that's in the 60s. That was in the late 50s and 1960s, where I was a kid. They did that in the middle of the night. So, yeah, okay, maybe we're in a gray area. We're not sure if it's legal or not. They did it by truck light in the middle of the night, and they buried it. They knew places where there were backhoes and there was sand quarry, and they could stick it in the ground. And when I talked to locals, even when I was a kid about that, because I saw it going on, everybody said, oh, yeah, you're not supposed to do that because they think there's something wrong with the paint. But that's why it's going in the ground like that when nobody can see it. I mean, everybody knew. That's the problem I always have with this story, that a lot of people, and I'm also talking about members of my family, a lot of people were sensitive to this thing. They were aware it was going on. I think I put it in the book somewhere. In 1962 and 3, you could get $100 to make 6 55-gallon drums disappear from the back of the Ford lot where the stuff was being stored. That was a lot of money back then. No questions asked. Just take it away, no questions asked. That's before they really started gearing up and bringing the mob in. They were kind of, in the early time, they were kind of their own mob. And years later, when we were dealing with this, an interesting conversation in Torn Valley, in the New York side, I got eventually, thanks to the supervisor, Chris St. Lawrence at the time, who made sure that I got to always be part of the dialogue with the lawyers. A couple of things were said, and one of them, I'll never forget, I told the chief this, is I made a reference to the Ramapos, and this was a Ford a CEO from Dearborn looked right at me and said, there are no Indians here. He said, there are no Indians here. And, that level of social institutionalized environmental racism was playing a card. It was actually playing a part of the discussion, I think is very, very significant. And another piece of that, and of course I argued with him about that, but that goes without saying. Another piece of it was when they were coming to an agreement for remediation in Torn Valley, they added this little caveat: don't tell any of your friends up there in Ringwood. They actually said that. And Chief, it was only a week later, I was at the KEG meeting, and Muhammad was there, Muhammad Zakar from Dearborn, and he looked at me and he said, "What are you doing here?" Because obviously we're sharing information because we're all victims of the same mess. But it illustrates the kind of mindset that that Ford paid for and that Ford fronted, and that local municipalities were either coping with or playing along with. And that's just, I just wanted to add that, because sometimes I hear this stuff about, oh, well, they're trying and they didn't know at the time and blah, blah. Stop. They knew at the time. That's why they did it in the middle of the night.
Even in Ringwood, paint sludge in an 18-wheeler dump body with plywood and then leaves on top of it.
Yep, disguising it.
I just want to note that James Rose wrote that as a child I play on the paint sludge fields. We acted as if we were on another planet. It was so thick you could not break it. Thank you for
those are interesting words he used, because that's what Ford wanted to believe, that they were sending the paint to another planet. That's so interesting. That was their attitude.
I just adjusted the map so that you could see the fact that Ramapo College is right here. The Ford plant was right here.
Mm-hmm.
Chuck grew up in Hilburn right here. Mm-hmm. The areas in New York that we're talking about as being contaminated are right here. The Torn Valley is up here. And then we come back to Ringwood and the contamination site right here. This is all very close together. This is not someplace that's far away from us. So I wanted to just take a moment and in the time that we have left, what I wanted to do is change the focus, because we've been talking now in this last period about contamination, about sickness, about the decimation of the Turtle Clan. And when Chief Mann, you came back and took on the mantle of being chief, what you really confronted was the situation of a community in despair, a community in dishealth, a community stuck in a situation that seemed perpetual because the cleanup never ever seems to happen. And even when it happens, the material is actually going to still be left in the community. With my students who have been really working on the concept that this area is uninhabitable and therefore there should be a relocation. And let me use that as a segue to ask you, Chief, to talk about your vision of what happens from here on. What's going to happen next for the Turtle Clan? Are they perpetually stuck in the turtle that I depicted on that opening slide, which actually had a paint sludge carapace? Or are we going to move back to a turtle that is free to roam and healthy and safe? What's your vision? Tell us.
So, just taken back a little bit by the fact that I'm just grateful that I am who I am, and that I'm from the Wolf Clan, the Lenape people, because it reminds me of my humility. So I just wanted to say that again. So just over the ridge from where the Turtle Clan core area is today is Tranquility Ridge. And there used to be a farm there. That farm was the old beach farm. It's an area that the state of New Jersey owns a big portion. Passaic County actually owns part of the land. And the idea would be that we could then take and relocate our community to that side of the mountain, the ridge line, and to build a green, totally green community using green magic homes, which are fiberglass reinforced panels that are put together. When they are put together and done, they are topped off with a living roof, which helps to insulate for one. For two, it'll actually put back more square footage of forest space than it's going to be removing. Utilizing, if it's possible, to utilize geothermal heating and cooling. That is for the environment, but it also, these things are also to reduce the pressure of the people so that they can begin to live and heal and be in that one world more, right? Composting systems where all of the homes could be funneled into a centralized place that could then take and turn that waste into water that's purer than you're drinking if you are getting water from the Wanakee Reservoir, and the other stuff that comes out of there would be known as human manure, which could also be utilized for certain things. One of the things that I am always careful to think about is that women's hormones um, seem to be not extracted from the water, from waste, and and obviously there's pills that get flushed down the toilet and things like that, right? That are not cleaned out, but to take the community, to remove the community to the other side, to fashion it in such a way where the community can be set up as a reserve. It could be self-contained to a certain point. These green magic homes are pretty phenomenal. They're only one level. They they would be well insulated. There's even grow pods so that you could add an extra pod onto a house or between houses or separate that could actually. Okay, you still hearing me, Michael? Can you hear me? Yeah.
We can hear you, Chief. You got
Okay.
shut
So
off for a second.
okay. So creating this community where not just for our people who live there now, but also for other community members who used to live there, moved away to get their kids out of there, so they wouldn't be, forced to live in their community. I mean, when we really think about this, we don't in an overall great picture, right? When the colonists came here, they understood the sense of community that indigenous people had, not just here, but around the world. One of the first things they did was to separate those communities out, to make them individuals, right? To break them down. That is what's happened to us, right? But indigenous people still maintain that sense of community. Even though I'm telling you right now, our community is broken because other people who moved out of there because of the toxic waste need to come back together. But the federal government, right? The federal government has portrayed this not just on indigenous people throughout the United States, but they actually portray this on every American. When you sit back and think about the fact that not one of you lives in a community, not one of you, not everybody is good. Everybody knows the person who lives next door to them, in an apartment building or even in a house, right? The Ramapos have over 5,000 tribal members, right? There's 1,500 or so Turtle Clan members. Those are only the ones that are listed on the rolls, right? And so they should all have the ability to come back as a community, because the separation and the breakdown of our community and our culture was nothing to do with us. It didn't even have anything to do with colonialism, right? What it had to do with was that this Ford paint sludge was allowed to be dumped in there by Ford itself, the town itself, and the state of New Jersey, and it's going to be left there by the federal government. So who does who does the Turtle Clan turn to? Who are the people who have a voice, right? And that's why I make such a fervent pitch to elevate the voice of not Chief Mann, because I'm nobody. I'm literally nothing, right? But all those 4 to 6 million people out there, they have and should have the right to clean water, clean air, and understand and realize true environmental justice, right? Shouldn't even be called that because it's actually a violation of our human right. And that's what we're talking about. And those folks that are there, that I don't even know them, they deserve to have a reserve too, to live on in a clean, green, healthy environment. So by being able to take our community and move it over there, maybe it costs 7 million, 10 million, 20 million. That's nothing. It's a lot of money, but it isn't really a lot of money, right? We just passed 2 emergency bills in the federal government for billions. I'm sorry, it was $1 trillion, wasn't it? Dollars, right? And I'm not saying that that's not needed, but if the United States of America can find all that money when it's needed, the federal government sure as hell could find 6 million, 7 million, $20 million to help save these humans. Forget the fact that we're Native Americans, right? How about the fact that we're human beings? When Chuck made that comment that they made, there are no Indians. Okay, so what are you saying? It doesn't matter whether or not we're Indians, right? How about the fact that we're human beings? How about the fact that, the deer is not just alive and the bird is not just alive, but to us the water is alive. The rock is alive. The tree is alive. The seed is alive, right? And that's what provides us hope. The resiliency of our ancestors, the tenacity of them, you could, if you had to look anywhere to see an indigenous people that has fought and beat the odds to be able to be breathing today, even if it is on one lung, right, or one kidney, that is an amazing testament to who we are as indigenous people, right? By putting our community over there, the smiles that would come on our people's faces, the pride that they would carry with them, the hope, right? The humility that would come back to them to believe that the world is just not a big pile of crap, right? They would then be able to put their faith back in humanity, which has done nothing but shun them because they chose to be true Native Americans who still reside in their homelands, who are being attacked from every corner of the planet by other Native Americans who claim that we're not who we are, to the federal government saying, oh, you're not who you are, and then say, okay, well, you are, but we just don't know where you came from. Well, we didn't come from a spaceship. Academia from around the country came to support us with our federal recognition. The person who was the primary author of the 83 regulations, Bud Shepard, quit the BIA, came to the Ramapough-Lenape Nation people's side, wrote back the BIA, Department of the Interior of the federal government, a letter and said that the Ramapo people have provided 80% more documentation and proof of who they are than any federally recognized tribe. What does that say? That means that we are the Muncie people. That means we are the Muncie tribe. That means we are the original inhabitants of what we know as the United States. That's what that means. And so to be able to have a ray of hope to put us on the other side of that mountain, I don't want to hear about green acres. We're talking about human life, right? And what you give us 900 acres, we'll give you 900 acres. You be responsible for that, and you go care about it. And if you don't care that 4 to 6 million people are drinking water and are going to die, well, that's on you, state of New Jersey. So putting this community over here is to breathe life back into the community, to actually rebuild the community, to give them back what they deserve that's been stripped from them, not 500 years ago, 56 years ago.
So, thank you, Chief. I wanted to move beyond the relocation, although the relocation is essential, to other things that you're doing, which, while the relocation percolates through the state government and hopefully gathers steam, you haven't actually sat around waiting uh, for things to happen. You've been out there really trying to generate a lot of activities on behalf of the clan and the tribe. Tell us, for example, about the Three Sisters Muncie Farm and the food sovereignty movement that it supports.
Sure. So, being who we are, Michael and I kicked around for a long time a couple of ideas. And the first idea was that we needed to create a nonprofit, which we did. It doesn't have the status of the federal government yet. We have a fiscal sponsor, but that what we created was Ramapo Culture and Land Foundation. So we created that Ramapo Culture and Land Foundation for environmental justice reasons, to store land, to protect our sacred places and ceremonial stone landscapes, to educate the non-indigenous people, um, to revive our culture that has been stripped from us because of the dumping. Um, and then we sat there one day and said, you know what? We need to add food sovereignty in there. And the reason why we do that is because we understand that food is medicine, right? So while parents are everybody is used to going to the grocery store, all the Americans have been trained. Not every one of them, but most of them. They go to the grocery store, they buy food. Most of the Americans buy food that's GMO. You may, if I grow a spear of broccoli and you buy a spear of broccoli, you might actually get the magnesium or whatever comes out of there for your brain, which you need for it to develop. And a lack of those chemicals in your brain gives you mental issues, right? Mental health issues. So food is medicinal, right? So then we decided that how we were going to address the issues that are faced by the Turtle Clan with no financial assistance from anybody in the world was to create Muncie Three Sisters Medicinal Farm. And so Michaeline and I took money that we had and money that was donated by a private donor to create Muncie Three Sisters Medicinal Farm. The idea, we leased 9 acres of land this past year. The idea was to grow 9 acres of CBD hemp, and then have that gone through the process, through processors, so that we could then realize a couple $1 million, which would then allow for us to offer financial help to those in hardship, to helping with oil for heat when the houses don't have no money because they're sick and can't work, or they lost their husband or they lost their wife, to education, to pay for the health, to pay for legal action, right? Because in the end, the only way that we're going to get to go forward, right, there has to be public opinion and public pressure. But on the other side of that coin, to actually bring this all to fruition, there's going to have to be bring a legal challenge to all of this to hold those are actually accountable. And so creating that Muncie Three Sisters Farm, we were going to grow 9 acres of hemp, and then COVID came. So we're sitting there thinking about what we would have to spend for all this medicine and to grow these, the seeds to grow the hemp. And Mikey and I decided that the thing that we needed to do the most was to be able to grow food to get to our communities so that our communities wouldn't have to go to the grocery stores as much. And that would mean that a community that is totally compromised health wise, if we could keep them out of the grocery store once or twice or 3 times a week or a week out of the month or something like that, then they would have a better chance at survival going through this pandemic. Then I got a phone call from Four Directions Mutual Aid out on Long Island, who they've become friends with us to help us in support of our community. Then DSA, New Jersey DSA, came on board, and then Khalsa Aid and a few others. And we have made such an impact on the community when we showed up with thousands of masks handmade from around the country. When we showed up with sanitizers, hand sanitizers. When we showed up with diapers for kids and wipes. When we showed up with food. When we showed up with 20,000 pounds of milk and vegetables and meats, right? That we had to go and take money we didn't have and rented a 26-foot box truck and then loaded all that stuff in there and then drove to the community and then spent another 6 hours there unloading and distributing food to the community, and then going to another community in Warwick and distributing food over there, stopping at another Ramapo's house on the way back to our home, right? We've taken that responsibility on ourselves. We pull money out of nowhere of our own. The sacrifices that Michaeline and I have made aren't known by everybody. We don't go around saying, well, I did this and I did that. We have an inherent responsibility to our people. And I need to go and help and find these people who are beginning to help us in a really big way. And we are beyond grateful for them. They are beyond supportive of Muncie Three Sisters Medicinal Farm, right? The farm now, we have a donated greenhouse, 16 by 100. We have another greenhouse being donated, is 30 by 96, 3,000 square feet. We have a grant that came in for 2,800 feet of deer fencing, right, to protect our crop, because we lost 90%, 80% of our crop this year because of the deer. Right, we're adding an additional 4.5 acres, which we're going to create a medicinal orchard. We'll grow hemp, but we're going to grow apples and pears and peaches and plums, and grow elderberry so that we can then turn elderberry, that medicine, into something that our people can have to fight this pandemic and this COVID, right? And then we have garlic that's planted already, anticipation for next year as a cash crop to help fund the farm, because the farm is going to create all this food, right? 9 acres, 13 acres. We're working on another 40-acre program with NOFA just around the corner, where we'll be growing food and grains, right? And it's not just to help the Turtle Clan, and it isn't just to help the Ramapough-Lenape Nation, but it's also to help those underprivileged communities too who are suffering, like in Newark and Patterson and Passaic and Jersey City. We are going to realize food sovereignty. No one can tell us that we can't do it. No one can tell us that we can't take a seed that's alive and plant 100,000 seeds to watch them grow, because every single one of those is a seed of hope, right? To be able to go there to see people we don't even know, to be able to offer them food, because that's a responsibility. It's an inherent responsibility of the Turtle Clan, of the Ramapough-Lenape Nation, and the Ramapough-Lenape Nation of the Muncie-speaking people. That's what I mean by it's our inherent responsibility. We are the tip of the spear. We are the people who are fighting for food sovereignty and food justice. We are the people who are fighting to make sure that 4 to 6 million people's water is protected. That's us. These people that were called Jackson Whites, the people that were called Mineys, still are. People who are depicted in movies like Out of the Furnace, right? The Red Road. Those same people that used to be on the side of the road to stop and help those people who broke down with flat tires, and those people being so grateful that they helped them get off the road, only next week to run into them in a grocery store and call them a Jackson White. That's who we are. The federal government has acknowledged us from day one. 1923, 1700s, all of them. We're the people who were faced with a public lethal gas chamber by spoken words and written words by Margaret Sanger, who other people hold up high for creating Planned Parenthood. But the reality of that, it was that she was a part of those people who created a public lethal gas chamber and tried to put the unwanted people of the Ramapo Mountains in it. And when that didn't work, what happened? They took that knowledge and brought it to Germany. And everybody who descends from Germany, from those Jewish people over there, our relatives, that tribe who suffered through all that hell, it was all thought about on these people right here who are still here today. And when they were liberated, they came where? Right here, to the place where creation started here, where the original people, the Ramapo-Muncie people, still reside today.
Thank you, Chief. I wanted to also have you comment on the partnerships you've developed. Of course, we've been working with you and Chuck and I and other people at the college, but you've reached out and created so many rich partnerships. By the way, we'll probably run a couple minutes over, but I can promise you that it's worth sticking it out. But I wanted to have you just comment on partnerships very briefly.
Sure. So early on, created a relationship with you, with Ramapo College. Very grateful for you and the work that you've done, Dr. Chuck Stead and others there. President Mercer, an incredible human being. We thank you for what you've done. And for those of you who don't know, Ramapo College sits on a Ramapough-Lenape person's land that was stolen, 300 acres, was owned by a DeGroat, right? He was known to read and write, and his name was signed with an X. And the land was sold for like $1.50 an acre when it was $1,200 an acre back in the day in Mawa. Underneath the tennis courts at the college, every time anybody goes there, they should pay respects and say a nishik to the Ramapo because our village is underneath it. Right? It was excavated and protected what could be by Edward Lennox, right? The first trading post in the state of New Jersey, right down the street, behind the Van Hopper house there, the LaRue house, right? And so our partnerships have really grown. So we have you helping us. We have NYU, Judy Zelikoff, environmental medicine. We have NJIT helping us with testing. We have Rutgers Newark, which has been an unbelievable asset to the Turtle Clan and Lenape people, from an amazing array of access to human beings who have ability to step forward and work behind the scenes to make things right. We actually have Anita Boschke from Rutgers, New Brunswick, right? Architectural landscape design. We have a book that was produced out of that, which is going to be added to. We have a documentary short film coming out, The Meaning of Seed, that was filmed at the farm and at our house. We have worked with Montclair State University. Lately, we're working with Passaic River Coalition on putting together a deer culling on land that our people can go and hunt clean deer and then distribute it throughout the community. We're working with Ridge and Valley Conservancy, protecting the Muckshaw Preserve, all of our ancestors' ceremonial stone landscapes and things that are there. To the very area that our farm is on was farmed by our ancestors prior to colonialism and settlers. It is an amazing day to be us, right? Even through all of this stuff, right? We have worked with the University of Pennsylvania, architectural landscape and design, potential to work on some things up north. We've partnered up with Four Directions Mutual Aid, Kelsa Aid, New Jersey DSA. We've partnered, we're working together with the Nature Conservancy, which is an international conservancy, and we're working with those folks here in New Jersey. I'll be giving their board a presentation next month. Incredible human beings. We're going to begin to work with them for interpretation signs on the Pollenskill River, which, they were responsible for getting those dams removed. And we talk about how does a Ramapo know that they're a Ramapo, and how does somebody know about a ceremony, and how does somebody know something sacred? Well, it's because it's in our DNA. And the example of it is this: when they removed that dam on the Polandskill, 5 miles south from the Delaware Water Gap, the shad had been for 100 years bumping their nose against the dam. 100 years they could not get home. 100 years their traditional pathways, their culture was being stopped and prevented from happening. When they removed that dam, those shad came out and back from being out at the ocean for a few years and came back, came up the Lenape Seapoo to Delaware River, entered the Polandskill, and went all the way to Blairstown. That is amazing. They have planted over 50,000 trees on the Polandskill. They even took it a step further and planted trees that are a little bit more, little less resistant to the cold weather and more resistant to the warm weather because of climate change. We're involved in all of these things. This is a hell of an inherent responsibility, right? But we can't move forward. No one can move forward unless those people who have that responsibility stand up. We need to be the face. We need Ramapo College to actually authorize the creation of the Ramapo Mountain Guardians so that we can work together to create a healthy and safe environment, one that will be here forever. We need the salt box transferred from where it is and brought there so that it can be continued to be used to teach the kids about the environment. Because when those kids would come to that place, or Michael's kids would come out of there and go to Ringwood, the learning experience that they get is untouched. Ramapo College has had the ability to tap into the Ramapo-Lenape Nation because the person who's on giving this speech tonight and this talk took the trust of all those people and carries it on his shoulders to allow that to happen. But when those students come outside of those four walls and outside of those textbooks into the natural world, which we're not supposed to look at as something separate, their minds open up. They're like sponges. They absorb everything. They feel the pain of the land, of the animals, of the water, and of the people. That's what's so important about having this stuff. It's not just a salt box, right? It's not just an environmental class. It's not just a Superfund site. We're talking about humanity. We're talking about Ramapo, right? We're talking about that picture.
So, Chief, those beautiful words lead us to the salt box, which you've mentioned. And I wanted to ask Chuck to step forward and to say a few words about the Saltbox project, which really is a project that involves so many Ramapo students in building it with you, Chuck, and then in joining the chief and Chuck for the ceremonies that were held there. Let's see if I've turned. Do I have your microphone on? Maybe not, because you're not saying anything.
Chuck, you have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I had him muted though. He couldn't. He can now do it.
There we go.
Here we are.
Now you can hear me.
Yep.
Okay. Since it's getting late, we'll just do this quickly. The Salt Box was it's an environmental research center. It was a recovered 200-year-old ironworkers' house. It was already steeped in history, and the idea of building it as a research center came from our friends at the Akwesasne Mohawk Reservation up on the northern border of the state. And that would be Amber Dawn LaFrance and Alicia Cook, the medicine woman up there. And they, in response to the impact, the industrial impact they were fighting, I went up there and Chief went with me, and we were comparing notes because they're also a nation that's been impacted by Reynolds and Reynolds Aluminum and General Motors, and I mean General Electric rather. There's been a lot of similarities, and of course the St. Lawrence's seaway is horribly contaminated. But nonetheless, they built something called their environmental division. And out of that, they established a place for research and education. And so, taking that idea back down into Torrent Valley, I managed to get the town of Ramapo to support the idea of reinstating the 200-year-old salt box house as a piece of historic preservation, but to build it as a research center, an ERC, so we could continue doing the field work that we were already doing. And it gave us a home. And that was a wonderful thing, but it grew from there. And it grew to other projects that enlisted all of our Ramapo friends and elders. We wound up building a medicine garden in the well field after that was cleaned up. There's Chief and clan mother of the Turtle Clan, Vivian Milligan, at the dedication of the medicine garden. And this was a terribly important thing, as we were growing traditional medicines and supplying Ramapos with sweetgrass, and we had braiding circles, and we were growing a lot of sage, both for cooking and for ceremony. And we also had up at the salt box a prayer circle that was a place that there you could perform ceremony there. These were really good community galvanizing things that we're bringing not just the students from the college, but also members of the original Ironworks community. We actually had descendants of the original Ironworks community still living in the hamlet, who were literally people related to the people who built the original salt box. That's a salt box is the name of the house. And then of course we had Ramapos, and we had good meetings there, and we had good ceremony there. And it became, Michael, you have a concept called a liberating structure in terms of dealing with contaminated communities, and how from the ground up a community can come together and structuralize a sense of commune as liberation. And for me, the salt box was the sort of physical manifestation of that idea. And once it was built, and it was all hands on, all kinds of people joined in, it was built communally. We had, for about four or 5 years, an excellent dialogue that continued. It was almost like we were building upon the dialectic of social constructs there. It was really a really sweet place. It's been closed by a town government that's changed hands, but that doesn't mean that the idea is closed. It was a good idea, and the people who were there they all went on to other things, which are also very good. And also, it reminded the folks in Ramapo of the traditions that they live on top of, that are right there all the time, whether they want to acknowledge them or not. But it caused them to acknowledge some of these traditions. And that's, for example, in that picture right there, that was a great day. And there was some ceremony. Of course, there was some shared wounded stories when Vivian talked a little bit about the people who'd most recently passed. But that's a part of this. It's, you don't look away from the story. You bring the story into yourself and you gestate with it. And that's a big part of what the salt box did. And to me, that's a big part of what's happening at Three Sisters Farm. The same thing. It's the same kind of growth.
Well, we are trying to get the salt box moved maybe to our campus, and maybe just to have a center for Ramapough-Lenape studies at Ramapo. We already offer a Muncie language course at Ramapo, with the help of course, the tribe, and Judy Sullivan has played a very key role in that. She should be acknowledged. And I think that what you did, Chuck, with the salt box was so very important. We should note, I could go back to the map, but we should note that the salt box is located right across from the town of Ramapo landfill, which is a hazardous waste site, and that all the area around the salt box was among the areas that Ford has cleaned up in the New York work that you spearheaded and oversaw. And our students had the opportunity to actually see reclamation of a contaminated site in a very direct way, in addition to all of the cultural and educational things that you've already mentioned. It's been a very powerful experiential site for us, and we want to get it back in some form, for sure. So I just want to move on, acknowledging from this picture also that the Akwesasne friends that you developed have been at the Saltbox many times. They've also been on campus because of you. And we've learned a great deal from them as you have. So, Chief, I know we can't see you at this point, but so I'll keep your picture up here. But I wanted to just throw one last question to you to wind us down to a close. Next week is Thanksgiving, and we certainly all understand the pilgrim story that leads to that holiday. From an Indigenous perspective, how do you view Thanksgiving?
Well, from my perspective, Indigenous people, um, if you're true to who you are and your culture, like for Michaeline and I, we walk in a prayerful way every day. We eat with spoons. We don't eat with forks. When you eat with forks, when you're at a ceremony and you go to pick up the food, you stab it, and you would be stabbing the spirit of that food. And so Michaeline and I take that to that step that we're always in ceremony, and we're always grateful and thankful to the Creator for everything we have, for this life, the opportunity, the experience that we're living in. And we are reminded that if you listen to my words earlier, and how the government and the settlers, the colonial people, separated us from our families and took away our sense of community for a very long time. Um, I see that this is what is needed, you know, on Turtle Island, is a time to come together to offer our thanks to each other, to the environment, to the food on the table, to our Creator, which whatever name you give that. Um, and I think that it's, when you take it out of the context of that meaning of why Thanksgiving was put together, and you realize the falsity that's with it, right? And you listen to the truths of the people who are speaking it. So for me, Thanksgiving is a time for us to come together, um, where we're not at a funeral, right? We're not at a wake. It's a time for us to come together and see each other and recognize each other and maybe talk about those that we've lost, and laugh and joke and have a good day. So I would encourage people to not necessarily to celebrate what happened to cause Thanksgiving as a holiday, but if we were to look at Thanksgiving and what our meaning behind something like this would be, I think that it's a good thing. The opportunity. There's many people on Thanksgiving Day that won't be sitting with their families, that will be bringing food to, homeless people, homeless veterans living on the street, you know, in wheelchairs because their legs were blown off, or their arm. So for me, that's what Thanksgiving is. It's being thankful and having the opportunity to be thankful for giving, to another human being. Every day when I walk this earth, I see a lot of things around me that make no sense, and it's easy for somebody to um, forget where they came from. You know, if we just all remember our original instructions, this world would be a better place. You know, courage, humility, love, respect, honor. Those are Anishik, Uncle Paul. Those are things in which we should live by. And when we live by those original instructions, it would be hard for you to walk down the street and have bad things to say about people, right? We're just all spirits living in a human body, you know, and So for me, that's what Thanksgiving is. It's being thankful for the opportunity to give. And Ishik to you too, Chuck. Um, lastly, I just would like to say that for whoever is left on here, you know, um, when you're sitting there with your families or by yourself for Thanksgiving, however that may turn out for any of you, just think about the people whose land you or ancestral land that you live upon, and maybe just take a moment to just say Anishik, to your creator for allowing you to be here, um, and having an opportunity to do something good. So, Mike, I appreciate you. Um, turtle to turtle, you know. Um, there's a lot to say. There's a lot to say about those two turtles there. On one hand, the turtle on the right, um, that honors us all. When you look upon the back of that turtle on the right hand side, you can almost see like footprints, right? Like on the back of a box turtle, or a wood turtle. And when you look at the back of that turtle, the creation story is on the back of it. When all those animals were on the back of the turtle, and all of the others, bigger, badder, even the beaver, tried to get to the bottom of the ocean to grab the soil to put on the back of the turtle for all things to grow. And when that muskrat, one of my uncles is from that clan, and when that muskrat said, I'll go, and all the other animals laughed, and they're like, ha ha, you're so weak and small. Look how small your tail is. You'll never be able to do. And while they were laughing, that muskrat dove off the back of the turtle and swam and swam and swam and swam. And after a long while, those animals, his friends that were on the back of the turtle, really got concerned and realized that he must not have made it and that he died.
Yeah.
And what ended up happening was that the muskrat floated to the surface, and when they noticed him, they noticed that there was something in his paw. And that muskrat, the smallest of all of them, with the smallest tail,
He's got a lot of
the
stories.
least abilities, placed that soil on the back of that turtle. And then all things grew. The trees grew, the land grew, the birds had a place to go. And what became of that is what we live on today, known as Turtle Island, or North and South America. That's our truth, right? That's our Bible. You know, that's the same as what was written over 2,000 years ago that has been rewritten many times. That creation story has never been rewritten. It is what it is. That turtle on the left-hand side that shows you those rings going around and around and around, that's creation in itself. When the creator, that's what our rattles are. And if Chuck, if you have your rattle, just shake it one time. That's what is for us is the acknowledgement of when the creator made and created everything. That is to remind us that sound of all those little beads. Thank you, Uncle Paul. That's what is it. It's to remind us of that. And that's what's so beautiful about indigenous people, right? We've never lost our fire, right? We've never forgotten who we are. We've never separated ourselves from our natural world, which we are a part of, right? Which we live in, regardless if we live in a high-rise apartment building or or a big fancy house down in the Keys of Florida, or we live in a cabin in the woods in Andover, New Jersey. right?
Chief, I'm going to say some concluding words, but first of all, on behalf of everybody here, Anishuk to you for this. Your words have been only eloquent. And Chuck, it's been a great pleasure to hear you and your story as well. And I think that we have had a chance to really have a conversation with Chief Mann, which is what our goal is. I would just give a different interpretation to this final slide, which is that I superimposed onto this picture these rings, and they actually are Fordite. They're made from the pink sludge that was dumped by Ford. And what I intended by this, Chuck, thank you. What I intended by this was that you've been living all these years with the Ford contamination on your back.
Mm-hmm.
And what your work is really about, and it is succeeding more and more as you engage in all these new endeavors and create new partnerships, is really throwing off that baggage of Ford and really escaping from it. A relocation, the farm, food sovereignty, all of the other projects that you're doing are really allowing the turtle clan to escape back into nature. And for that, I think your story, your work is so important. And we will continue to want to hear from you. We will continue to support it. And we're all grateful for the fact that you have contributed to our Ramapo College program here to acknowledge Native American Heritage Month. But we really have a deep heritage. We don't have to go far away from it. It's right here in the Ramapo Mountains. So with that, I want to thank everybody for coming. I want to thank the chief, of course. I want to thank Chuck. From the Ramapo side, Nicole Morgan Agard, as well as Janine Miller Lagem. The actual turtle with the cordite on its back was done by my stepson, Ruslan. So I want to thank him. And I want to thank everybody who has attended. Good night. And we'll see you again soon, I hope. This ends our program.
It's no coincidence that my camera's not on. And Chuck, stop laughing.
I gotta say, only Michael Edelstein would come up with a Fordite turtle. That, gosh. Only you, Mike. Good
Hi,
night.
Michael. See you. Thank you, everybody. Anishik.
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 Like